Welcome, Drink with James, episode 196. Before we get into the serious stuff, I have something that is personally upsetting to me, and something I want to talk to you guys about, and that is Stanley Tucci's Negronis. Now, if you guys watch the show regularly, you know that I am a Negroni fan. I didn't start out that way. First time I had them, I actually hated them, but it's kind of replaced the Manhattan as my go-to drink. Now, this week on social, Stanley Tucci, much beloved actor, posted to his IGTV himself making a Negroni. And I, like everyone else, found him adorable. But as I watched the video, things kind of went downhill from there. One, he used 2 parts gin, 1 part vermouth, 1 part Campari. It's supposed to be 1-1-1. I could forgive that. Maybe he's just a big gin fan. Fine. Then things really started to turn south when he shook the cocktail once it was made. Okay, you do not, under any circumstances, in any place or time, shake a Negroni. So he's shaking the shit out of this Negroni, and I think, okay, honest mistake. We all could have done it. I'll give him a pass. He pours it into a glass without ice. He has it up. Again, that's a preference thing. Generally, Negronis should be served with a big block of ice, 1 large ice cube, not up, but fine. Maybe you like them up. That's I guess acceptable. But then, just the proverbial cherry on top was an orange slice. He put a slice of orange into the Negroni, and friends, that is just where I had to draw the line. If you are ever in a bar and you order a Negroni and they give you a slice of orange, not an orange peel, I implore you to push that drink away and run the fuck out of there, because they have no idea what they are doing at all. And so, Mr. Tucci, I'm sure you're a Drink with James fan. I'm sure you're watching this, and I mean no disrespect. And if you want to debate Negroni recipes, I welcome you on the show. I am happy to embarrass you in front of my enormous viewership that I have. Okay. Before we jump into questions, I have 2 things I want to touch on. First, PPP loans. You guys saw I did a whole episode on PPP, how to get it, what it is, what's forgivable, how much you can ask for, how you ask for it, all that, right? If you haven't seen it, it's a few episodes ago. You should definitely check it out. Still relevant. Last week, the program ran out of money, and Congress, went back and debated back and forth as they do. Yesterday, Senate, that would be Tuesday, the Senate passed a bill to add an additional $300 billion to the PPP program. House votes tomorrow. So by the time you're watching this video, my hope is that program will be refunded. It will have more money in it. So if you haven't applied yet, but you saw that it ran out of money, you should definitely apply. If you applied but you didn't hear anything, hit your banker back up. I'm not sure it will get funded again after this time, and so you definitely want to jump on that if you are eligible for it. And again, if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I did a whole episode on it, so check it out. Second thing I want to talk about is, again, money. Personally, but one who I respect, whose career I've followed and has been doing this longer than I have. And I followed their career for years. I know they're hardworking and generally very liked in the industry. And there was no drama about this, but they posted a kind of home reveal on their feed recently. And it was a beautiful home, obviously very tastefully done, and also not cheap. And, it's interesting because my first reaction was to be annoyed. And I think it brings up a larger conversation about money and possession and the pursuit of luxury items during this time. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. Many more will die of this virus. And the more, and tens of millions of people have already lost their jobs, and those numbers are only going to go up. And so, there are huge percentages of the population who have been, destroyed by this virus and crisis, either, actually died or had someone in their family die, or, destroyed economically. And I just don't think this is the time for flexing, on the things that you own and the things that you have bought. And I think the world that existed 6 months ago where it would be okay to post that just doesn't exist anymore. And we've talked before about being able to read the room and understand the context which you're speaking in. And, I'll just speak personally. This has been the most difficult month of my professional career. We are doing everything we can at 4 to make sure that we don't have to have layoffs and that people get to keep their jobs. It is really hard, and I don't fucking want to see people out there flaunting their money. I just don't. I don't have any interest in seeing it. And I remember years ago having lunch with a friend who had become very financially successful, and they were saying that they felt the more their life changed, the more money they acquired, the more things they acquired, the more their life ceased to look like even that of a normal privileged person, the less they felt they could talk about it on social media. And if you think about a lot of wealthy people, most of them are very private. Most celebrities, honestly, are really private. I think obviously the Kims of the world and stuff have kind of bucked that trend and have made flaunting their wealth, part of who they are. But even obviously Kim has stopped that a bit since the robbery. But I do think that that this is just not the time to show off material possessions. And I think that we have said that, for influencers, this is a time that you should kind of reconnect with why you started this in the first place. You probably didn't start doing what you're doing for the money. Maybe that has changed over the years, and now you look at it and that is what you do it for. But I just don't think, as an influencer, as a person, if the most interesting thing about you is your possessions, well, then that's like pretty sad. And if the only thing you have to talk about is the shit that you bought or how much money you have, then that's not really very interesting. And I think that over the coming years, a lot of people will continue to suffer terribly financially. And I don't really think that there's going to be a huge appetite for that. And I think that you need to think as an influencer about how much of your life you're willing to show, and about being respectful of the situation that the vast majority of people are in, which is, that they're really hurting. First question, somebody's asking how diligent they should be on following up on the invoice, knowing that companies are suffering right now, but the company owes them money. So essentially, how do you go about getting paid? Right now, there's a lot of companies out there that have just straight up said, we are not paying anyone. Equinox's CFO sent a letter out recently that just said, until further notice, Equinox isn't paying anyone. They're not paying rent, they're not paying. If they owe you money in any capacity, you're not getting it right now. They are not alone in that message. And I think that as an influencer, you have to expect that some companies won't pay, potentially ever, or those payments will be really delayed. And just because a company is suffering and just because they can't pay you right now or because they're not paying you right now does not in any way mean you shouldn't be following up with them. It is my experience that, the more you ask, the sooner you get paid. And the whole squeaky wheel gets the grease cliche is true. That like most brands will be paying some people, and if you are persistent enough, then you can be the person that they pay. But if you aren't giving them a hard time, if you're not following up a lot, they're not going to jump to pay you. Now, where this gets complex is let's say you have a great relationship with the person who works in digital or PR at a brand, and they haven't paid you. Now, you don't want to badger that person that you have a good relationship with, the person you go out to drinks with a few times a year, and you've come to like. You don't want to badger them for a payment necessarily. You need to try and get an introduction to the accounting department, to the people who are going to pay them. And you can just reach out to your contact and say, hey, I'm having some trouble getting payment. I know that you don't really have any control over this. Could you just introduce me to the accounting department or to the person you work with there? I just want to talk to them directly, make sure I have everything I need to get paid. They should definitely introduce you. If they don't, you can always try accounting at whatever their URL or email signature is. If that doesn't work, call the corporate number. I had a brand that owed me over $10,000 once, and I couldn't get paid, and eventually I just called corporate and I said, could you connect me to accounting? And I finally found a person, and I got paid in the next week or so. So there are ways to get around it, and if you can, get that communication away from the person you work with and move it to accounting so that you don't have to muddy the relationship with that person you work with. But end of the day, you need to get paid. And it is also their responsibility to make sure that happens. So if there's no way to get it connected to accounting, I would continue to pressure that person. But if you don't bother brands that aren't paying you often, you'll probably never get it. So there is no too much. You stop emailing them when they pay you. It's a pretty simple transaction there. Next question is, what are the trends in luxury travel, and what can we generally expect from travel, both the industry and influencers in general? Look, I don't know what travel is going to look like. I think for influencers at this point, if you are thinking that you're going to travel abroad in 2020, I would probably let go of that fantasy. I don't really see a lot of international travel happening until there's a vaccine. Maybe, if there's great treatments, if there's antibody tests, and tracking and tracing things that happen, maybe that will get easier. But in general, I would not think that international travel is going to be happening the rest of this year. That's the expectation that I would throw out there. Now, most of the audience watching this is in America. There's a lot of America out there that people haven't explored, and I think that will open for travel, before the international markets do. And so I think that if you're a travel influencer, if you're someone that travel has been a big part of what you do, think about the places you haven't been in America. Have you been to our national parks? Have you been to the Tetons? Have you been to Yellowstone? Have you been to Seattle or Portland? There's a lot of America out there that people don't see because they want to, go to the Amalfi Coast every summer. But I just don't see that happening. And I think that as a travel influencer, you're going to have to get pretty creative, because I think the days of, going, doing 150,000 miles a year of travel are not going to return until we have a viable vaccine for this virus. So I think you're going to have to try and pivot and figure out what travel looks like. Again, I don't have any huge insight into what that's actually going to be, but I do know it will be vastly different. And so you think about your hotel partners and the relationships you have there. Like, think about the ones that have a big presence in America. Like, these hotels are hurting, and they're not going to have a lot of money. These hotels are hurting. They're not going to have a lot of money. They are going to want to show people that it's okay to travel, and so I think I can continue to see influencers being a big part of that story and showing Americans and people around the world that it's okay to travel again, whatever that travel eventually looks like. But I would be conscious of what you're asking for. I know there's never been a huge amount of money in travel regardless, but I would think that, the idea of big budgets and things like that in travel right now are, going to take a year or 2 or 3 to rebound. Expedia's CEO recently came out and said, they usually spend $5 billion a year in advertising. They're going to spend $1 billion this year. That's 80% reduction in their ad budgets. So take that as a indicator of where the rest of the industry is going to be. It's definitely going to be scaled back a little bit. One more money question is, do we think it's wise for influencers to be signing contracts, and how do you go about making sure you get paid? We talked about what happens when you're owed money. Keep asking for it. What should you be thinking about in your contracts right now? Okay, a few things. One, let's put a kill fee in there. If you don't know what a kill fee is, it is just that. It's a fee if the brand backs out of the contract. So I think industry standard is generally 25% of the contract value if content isn't created, 50% of the contract value if content is created, and then if it's a multiple post campaign and they pull out in the middle, obviously they have to pay you for the posts that have already been posted, and then 50% or 25% if you created the content for the other posts. So putting a kill fee in there definitely gives you a little bit of protection. Something else that could be hard, but if you're a big influencer and you're talking about a big contract and it's with a brand that isn't established and maybe isn't really huge, you might consider taking 50% up front. It's pretty rare in the influencer space, but I think if you were a bigger influencer, and again, it's a bigger contract, an ambassador contract, something like that, then I think you could ask for it. If it's a big brand, if you're working with a large retailer or a huge, multi-billion-dollar brand, those brands don't generally default on their payments, so I don't think you have to really worry about that. If it's a startup, if it's a brand you don't think has as deep of pockets and they're offering you a big contract, maybe try and negotiate for 50% upfront, even if that means you have to bring the contract value down. At least you'll know you have some of that money to kind of hedge if something does go wrong, because we're definitely going to see more businesses going out of business than we have in 10, 15 years happening here in the next 6 to 12 months. So it's definitely something to consider. Look, that is all from another Florida edition of Drink with James. As always, ask us questions. I look forward to a day when I don't have to say PPP again, but again, I implore you, if you haven't checked this program out, definitely do. Because 2 episodes ago that I talked about it in length. That money will be gone very soon for good, and as taxpayers, you're paying for this program anyway. And if your business has been impacted, you should definitely look into it. That is all. See you guys next week.